Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you are doing great today. In today's lesson, we're going to talk about database roles. In our previous lessons, we had talked about how to control user access, and we created a user in our exercise and assigned some system privileges and some object privileges. So today, we're going to look at what a role is. Now, a role is the name that is given to a group of related privileges that can be granted to a database user. The best way I can explain this is very simple. Think of a role as a basket that contains more privileges, okay? Now, when you create a role, you can assign system privileges or object privileges to that role, and then you can grant that role to a user. Now, this method makes it easier to manage privileges. Imagine that you have to create 10 users or 20 users, as the case may be, and you need to assign system privileges and object privileges. Let's assume that you have up to 10 or 8 object privileges and then maybe 10 system privileges to assign each user. Does it mean that you're going to be running 16 or 20 different grant statements for each user, and then you'll be doing that like 10 or 20 times, as the case may be? It makes the work cumbersome and very clumsy, right? So to effectively manage this process, you create what is known as a role, and then you assign necessary privileges to that role, so that based on a user's requirement, you could just assign a role to the user without necessarily having to run too many grant statements, right? So enough of the stories. Let's just head over to our lab and then see how this works in practical terms. So for the records, I'm logged in as the sys user to my SQL developer, right? And if you remember, in our previous lesson, we created a user known as Ella. So what I want to do today is I want to drop that user and then recreate the user so we can use it for this practice of assigning a role. So to do that, first, let's be sure where we are. Show con_name. So we are in the root container, and we know that we cannot create a local user in the root container. So what are we supposed to do? We are to alter our session, set container equal to orclpdb, right? Now the session has been altered. So I want to drop the user, Ella. Drop user, Ella. User Ella has been dropped, right? So I'm going to create the user again. So I've just recreated the user Ella, right? Now, the first thing I want to do is to create a role and assign all of those privileges that we assigned the user Ella to that role, and then just grant the role to the user Ella, right? So follow me closely as I do this. So the first thing I want to do is to create the role known as test role, right? So we are creating a role known as test role. Execute. Role, test role created. Now we're going to grant all of those object privileges and system privileges to this role. Okay, so we're going to grant create session, create table, create view, create synonym to test role. All of these system privileges will be granted to the role test role. Let's execute. You can see grant succeeded, right? Now, the next thing we are going to do is to grant the role to the user Ella. Now, for that, I'll run the command grant test role to Ella. Grant succeeded. I don't know if you're understanding what I'm trying to do. Now, I've granted all of these privileges to this role known as test role, and all I did was to grant the role test role to Ella. So Ella will now have all of these privileges because she has been granted this role. Okay? So again, let's try to establish a connection using the user details Ella. Now, before we do that, when we created the user, we did not include a password. So we're going to do this. Alter user Ella identified by Ella123. This is her password. User Ella altered. So now we can establish a connection with the user profile. So we click on new connections. Connection name is Ella. Username is Ella, and then password is Ella123. Okay. Host name is tests.com, and then service name is orclpdb.com. Right? So let's test the connection. You can see the connection was successful. Now, you would recall that we did not directly grant create session to Ella as newly created. However, because she inherited a role, or she was granted a role that has the create session system privilege, she was able to connect to the database, right? So this is how role works. You can actually assign more than one role to a user, and you can also assign one role to multiple users. So let's assume that you have several accountants working in the accounts department, okay? You could create a role that has the create session and then the update object privilege on any salary column. So that way you don't need to write multiple grant statements for the different accountants. Rather, you just create a role, assign all the necessary privileges that they need to work with, and you can assign that role to each one of them. So guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it was interesting to you. If it was, kindly like it and share it widely. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell icon so you don't miss out whenever I upload another valuable content. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye for now.